Meng Yuanxi and I were rescued from a big fire at the same time. But after she woke up, her talent astounded the world, and her political essays enlightened the people. Even my fiancé, His Highness the Crown Prince, wanted to break off our engagement for her. She said that in this world she was the destined winner. But I said nonchalantly, to do it all over again, and you've still made no progress. Meng Yuanxi and I were rescued from the great fire at Guyuan Temple together, and we each woke up after several days in a coma. For the next half a year, her great fame spread throughout the entire capital. Meanwhile, I remained silent for half a year, staying behind closed doors. Until the day of my hair pinning ceremony, the Crown Prince personally came to my home and said he wanted to break off the engagement. That day, 1,000 kites flew high, and the hall was filled with guests and friends, all celebrating for me. And then he came, walking slowly in a magnificent cloud-patterned brocade robe, capturing everyone's gaze with the flutter of his sleeves. In front of everyone, he said to me personally, "You and I have been childhood sweethearts for over 10 years. I was young and naive before, thinking we could promise to grow old together. But now I realize it is merely the affection between a brother and sister. Let's just call off this marriage." The crowd whispered amongst themselves, casting all sorts of gazes my way. The originally grand hair pinning ceremony instantly became a joke. Father was instantly furious, and he questioned in a stern voice, "Your Highness, are you bullying my Jiang family as if we have no one to stand for us?" The Crown Prince showed a bit of apology, then slightly cupped his hands and said, "Lord Jiang, I am sorry. As a token of my apology, I have already requested my imperial father to bestow upon Yanru the title of Princess Zhaoyan. In the future, I will also treat her as my own sister and will absolutely not let others bully her." I stopped my impulsive older brother and then walked step by step to the front of the Crown Prince, not bursting into tears as everyone imagined, nor was I overwhelmed with grief. Not even half a sentence of accusation. Just calmly said one sentence: "This marriage is easy to break, but not easy to make. If it is broken today, there will be no chance for regret." But he emphatically dropped 2 words: "No regrets." Hearing this, "no regrets," I felt relieved. In my memory, someone once knocked on the gates of the Jiang residence at night during a torrential downpour, his fine clothes already soaked through, all his majestic bearing and demeanor cast aside, just to tell me he regretted it. I ordered someone to pour wine, then raised my cup to toast him, and said with a light laugh, "Your Highness, after drinking this cup of wine, our marriage agreement will be void, and our childhood friendship also ends here. May your great ambitions be fulfilled hereafter, with a good person by your side." He seemed surprised by my calm acceptance, but still eagerly drank down the wine in the cup and said, "Many thanks." Perhaps he was thanking me for not pestering him, thanking me for letting him go. I put down my wine cup, met his astonished gaze, and said calmly, "I once had an unruly nature too, acting recklessly as I pleased. Later, when you and I were engaged, everyone said I was the future crown princess. If I didn't do well, I would bring shame to you, so I strived to learn. After many years, I became skilled in the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, well-versed in classics and histories, and learned court etiquette, all to be a match for you, the Crown Prince. Today, I also thank you for letting me finally cast off these shackles." After I finished speaking, everyone present showed expressions of sorrow and pity. My engagement to him was arranged by the late Empress on her deathbed. I've carried this engagement for years, unable to live as I pleased. Hearing of the many efforts I made for him, a complex emotion flickered in his eyes with a hint of guilt. His figure looked somewhat flustered as he left, losing the calm determination he had when he arrived. My older brother asked why the Crown Prince was so resolute. I said in a low voice, "It is probably for Meng Yuanxi." He made the absurd end between us known to the entire world, using this publicly witnessed annulment to show Meng Yuanxi his sincere devotion. After Meng Yuanxi woke up, the matter of her disguising herself as a man to take the imperial examinations caused a huge uproar. In the end, it was the crown prince who strongly vouched for her, allowing her to escape punishment. The emperor tested her, but she composed a poem within 7 steps and spoke in polished prose. She presented the Jin Si, offering advice on the 4 aspects of managing officials: pacifying the people, enriching the treasury, and governing the military. Her policy proposal was startlingly insightful, drawing the attention of both the court and the public. The emperor, cherishing her talent, granted her a special pardon. For a time, her fame in the capital was second to none. She became a legendary woman on everyone's lips, and even the current crown prince was captivated by her. Many romantic tales about them circulated among the common folk. After I was rescued, during the half-year I lived in seclusion, the crown prince also came to see me a few times. But every time he would mention that brother Meng he had met among the common people. The admiration in his eyes was practically overflowing. The more he mentioned that person, the less frequently he would come to see me. In his descriptions, that brother Meng was immensely talented, with a mind full of grand strategies. His free-spirited and unrestrained nature was something he, as a member of the royal family, yearned for but could never have. That person understood his thoughts, and he regarded him as a soulmate. At first, his eyes were full of admiration, but later he gradually changed. His brows were always furrowed with a hint of sorrow, and when he faced me, he always seemed to want to say something but would stop himself. I suppose by then he had already found out that the brother Meng who shared his interests, the one he considered a soulmate, was actually a woman who made his heart flutter. The romantic rumors about them had long reached my ears. It was said that the crown prince galloped on horseback with her on South Mountain, and taught her how to draw a bow and shoot wild geese. For her, the crown prince searched through all the classic texts in the palace's library pavilion, just to find a rare book she had casually mentioned. My older brother asked me, confused, "Why can you accept the crown prince's change of heart so calmly, and agree to call off the engagement so easily? You clearly liked him so much." Because I was once obsessed. I once tried to force it, but his heart had already changed. Besides ending up a complete mess, what else would I have left? Since I already know the outcome, it is better to just let go gracefully and preserve my last bit of dignity. I am the one who doesn't want him anymore. Hearing me say this, my older brother's eyes were filled with shock. He didn't understand why I had changed too. My marriage to him was arranged by the late empress before she passed away. The Jiang clan has prospered for 100 years, and by my grandfather's generation, we had already produced 3 generations of grand secretaries. The late empress wanted the Jiang family to be a source of support for the crown prince. Now he has cast aside this support with his own hands. Regarding the crown prince's insistence on calling off the engagement, the emperor was furious and summoned my father to placate him. After he called off the engagement, he couldn't wait to submit a memorial to the throne, requesting to install Meng Yuanxi as the crown princess of the Eastern Palace. In the end, His Majesty actually said to let both the principal and secondary consorts enter the residence at the same time, and the secondary consort was from the noble Yang family. My father and older brother, afraid I would be sad, suggested that I go stay at our other residence for a while. But I refused. The good show in the capital has just begun. How could I possibly leave? When I ran into Meng Yuanxi, her eyes were full of pity, a pity mixed with an inexplicable sense of superiority. There was always a look of contempt in her gaze. "Miss Zhang, you well-bred, ladies are so demure, you are like a bunch of marionettes. Wooden, uninteresting, and old-fashioned. This must be why the crown prince grew tired of you." As she spoke, she even shook her head as if she despised this demureness. This must be what they mean by crushing someone's spirit. I looked at her disdainful gaze and said with a smile, "I can't compare to Miss Meng, who is so carefree and unrestrained, treating the world's rules as if they're nothing." Hearing me say this, she seemed quite pleased, her tone full of smugness and arrogance. "That is right. His Highness says he longs most for a free and unrestrained life, and also wishes to be a person who can act as his heart desires, and you can't give him that. I heard the crown prince has already requested an imperial decree, and that in the near future, both the primary and secondary consorts will enter his residence at the same time. That is truly worthy of celebration. Yanru has already prepared a generous gift. As soon as I finished speaking, a strange look appeared on her face, and she said with resounding finality, "His Highness's heart has no room for so many people. The man I marry must have only me, and me alone, for his entire life." Her words were enough to shock the other women of this world, but I was not surprised at all. I said with considerable regret, "That is truly a pity, as the Crown Prince. I am afraid His Highness is bound to disappoint your expectations." She raised an eyebrow, as if her competitive spirit had been provoked, and sneered. "What you couldn't do, I will insist on achieving just to show you." Several days later, the imperial decree bestowing the marriage arrived at the Hmong residence, and the Crown Prince went in person to announce it to show its importance. But everyone didn't expect Hmong Yuanxi to propose on the spot that she wanted to be with the Crown Prince forever, the two of them, and if not, she'd rather remain unmarried for life. Her words made everyone glance sideways, and even more so shocked the court, leaving the Crown Prince in a difficult position. What Hmong Yuanxi relied on for her fearlessness was the Crown Prince's affection for her, and every word she spoke mentioned the love between her and the Crown Prince. Unique in the world, unable to accommodate a third person. The Crown Prince had never met such a bold and unrestrained woman, nor such a resolute declaration of, "Only this one in my life." His eyes reddened on the spot, and he only said that he understood the weight of this love and would never fail her. In the end, he held her hand, and they knelt together outside the Suyu Hall, requesting His Majesty to revoke the decree of bringing in a secondary consort. He was willing to bear all the blame, and if not allowed, he would not rise from his knees. They knelt for a whole day, and the emperor was so angry he smashed over a dozen teacups. The late empress was the emperor's first wife, who accompanied him through the difficult years of exile in Bashu, sharing an affection beyond the ordinary. As for the Crown Prince, he was the emperor's own child, and towards him, the emperor ultimately had the side of a doting father, like any commoner. In the end, the emperor's heart softened, and as the night grew dim, he granted the Crown Prince's request. Hmong Yuanxi married into the East Palace as she wished, becoming the sole mistress of the East Palace. The women in the capital initially thought she was crazy, but now they are all extremely envious. To be able to make the Crown Prince of a nation so deeply in love, to the point of leaving his back courtyard empty. Everything that women in the world dare not even dream of. She has obtained it all. When she reappeared before me, she was dressed in brocade, beaming with joy, and the maid behind her was holding a box. "These are the items you gave to Jinan over the years. They are no longer suitable to be kept in the Eastern Palace, so Jinan asked me to bring them back to you." Yeah, Jinan is the Crown Prince's given name. She deliberately called him that to show closeness, and also to annoy me. I glanced over the booknotes, brushes, tassel pendants in the box. Every year on my birthday, I would give him a small item, all carefully selected. I didn't expect to have accumulated so many. I had my maid accept it, and said with a light laugh, "Thank you, Crown Princess, for delivering it in person. It is a shame that the summer fireflies the Crown Prince caught for me, and the spectacular fireworks he set off for me, can't be returned in the end." A hint of displeasure flashed in her eyes, which she quickly hid, and said deliberately, "The Crown Prince regards you as a sister, and I will treat you the same way in the future. Then thank you." I acted too casually, which made her frown, as if she had lost some sense of accomplishment and joy. "Zhang Yanru, you are so calm and collected. It makes me feel like winning too easily, losing the challenge. Are ancient women like you so submissive and obsequious, so ignorant, with no opinions or courage? Truly laughable." Her brows furrowed deeply, her eyes revealing utter contempt and disdain. Her reaction was within my expectations. She looked down on me, or rather, she looked down on the entire group of ancient women she spoke of. Challenge. "So the Crown Prince is just your trophy then?" I sat on the swing, looked up at her, and saw her sneer and say dismissively, Yes, to you he is the childhood sweetheart and fiancé of many years. To me, he is just a trophy worth showing off. His deep affection and power, his love and favor, are things I am destined to obtain on this journey. In this world, I will be the destined winner. The first time I heard these words, I didn't understand the confidence behind her arrogance and condescension. Nor did I understand why she always looked at everyone from a superior, condescending perspective. But now I am hearing these words for the second time. And I understand why she always says these things in front of me, and why she refuses to let me go. Because those were things she personally snatched away from me. With every item she snatched, she became 3 points more triumphant, until she finally snatched everything. She could then say loftily, "Ancient women were indeed foolish and useless." She left triumphantly, the maidservant, feeling indignant, whispered, "She snatched everything that rightfully belonged to Miss, and she still dares to be so arrogant." I handed the pastry to the young maidservant and appeased her, saying, "Anything that can be snatched away doesn't belong to me, and I don't care for it anyway." That day, I deliberately brought up the matter of the principal and secondary consorts entering the mansion at the same time, which was precisely to provoke her. But she was too eager to announce her success to the world, to prove her uniqueness to all women. So she couldn't wait to use such an extreme method to obtain this one, of a kind status. In the current situation, she is satisfied, and I am also very satisfied. Watching Meng Yuanxi's departing back, a smile played on my lips, my fingertips lightly stroking the leaves on the treetop branches as I said nonchalantly, "I have returned through rebirth. If you haven't improved at all, this game of chess would be a bit boring." Although Meng Yuanxi became the crown princess, the emperor clearly dislikes her, and while he appreciated her talent back then, her various actions afterward have pretty much ruined all that goodwill. But the crown prince was extremely fond of her sharp, unrestrained demeanor. Perhaps that was what he craved but couldn't achieve. He hoped that freedom and ease could be realized in Meng Yuanxi. My brother detested Meng Yuanxi to the extreme, and couldn't stand seeing her make things difficult for me everywhere. Just as it was the 15th, I begged my brother to accompany me to the temple to burn incense, saying it was because I had narrowly escaped death last time and was still scared. My brother listened and hurried to prepare. But this time, among the people I chose to accompany me, besides 1 or 2 young maids, I also brought the wet nurse and a few nannies. My brother, on the other hand, chose some capable guards to accompany us. After arriving at Baoguo Temple to burn incense, my brother was anxious to return home, but I insisted on dragging him around, until a cry of alarm erupted from the crowd, saying that a woman seemed to be showing signs of premature labor. The crowd panicked and hastily took her to the back courtyard. I told my brother to stay put, and then led a few nannies towards the back courtyard. My brother said I was not yet married and should not go to such places. I said human life was at stake, and the nannies were experienced women who could be useful in case of emergency. He couldn't persuade me and could only reluctantly agree. In the back courtyard, everyone was in a panic. The woman's cries of pain became more urgent. The maids serving her were flustered and helpless. I walked up to them and said in a deep voice, "The nannies with me have also helped deliver babies. If you trust us, why not let them try?" Those people seemed to have found saviors, but they still dared not make decisions on their own. In the end, the woman herself nodded. The nannies went inside, and I sat outside waiting quietly, but those maids were as anxious as ants on a hot pan, until the baby cried, and mother and son were safe. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The maids rushed forward, and the attendants busied themselves returning to deliver the good news. I left with a few wet nurses, quietly and without a sound. As soon as I left the back courtyard, I saw Meng Yuanxi and his party hurrying over. When she heard that the woman in the back courtyard had given birth safely, her expression towards me changed drastically. Her eyes were filled with doubt and disbelief. The previous few times she saw me, she always had a smug sense of superiority, but today her mask of composure cracked for the first time. "This is impossible." For the first time, a look of apprehension and fear appeared in her eyes. I brushed past her, saying faintly, Do you think you are the only one who knows the future? As the words fell, they scattered with the wind. She turned her head to stare at me, as if to confirm whether those words had actually been spoken. But I didn't stop. Instead, I walked away slowly, leaving her to be consumed by suspicion and torment. The next day, I heard from a maid that a distinguished guest had arrived at the manor and insisted on seeing me. When I arrived at the main hall, I saw the general who protected the state cupping his hands in a bow towards me. "Thank you, Miss Zhang, for saving my wife's life yesterday. If it weren't for you having your wet nurse's help, the consequences would have been unimaginable. This great kindness, this general will never forget." This reception even startled my father and brother. Everyone knows that General Zheng Guo and my father have always had political disagreements, and they would glare and fume whenever they met. When he came to visit in person today, Father was still wondering about the purpose of his visit, but unexpectedly, the moment they met, he clasped his hands in a deep bow. Father was also stunned on the spot, managing to force a polite smile. I bowed slightly in return, and then said, "You are too kind, General. Seeing that your wife and son are safe and sound, I am also relieved." That General Zheng Guo engaged Father in a long round of pleasantries, as if the two had never had any disagreements before, but were old friends of many years. He also said that when his youngest son reaches his first full month, his entire family would pay a visit in person to express their thanks. Making peace with General Zheng Guo was a blessing for both the Zhang family and the imperial court, and Father was happy to see it happen. Only my older brother's brows were furrowed. He asked tentatively, "Little sister, why do I always feel that all of this was within your expectations?" I retorted, "What, am I, an immortal or something, able to foretell the future?" He scratched his head, seeming to feel that something wasn't right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He could only hesitate, then lapsed into silence. General Zheng Guo's wife had a sudden premature birth. Even the maids and servants attending her didn't expect it. So who could have guessed that I knew in advance? As for Meng Yuanxi, one can only say that other things were within her expectations, but my early appearance was outside of them. In my previous life, the crown prince was deposed and then reinstated, precisely because he had the support of General Zheng Guo behind him. But in this life, Meng Yuanxi came late. When the General Zheng Guo's residence held a grand full moon banquet, I was cordially invited, and to my surprise, seated at the main table, the general's wife even held my hand and praised me non-stop. Meng Yuanxi, on the other hand, was given the cold shoulder. Everyone knew it was her intervention that caused the crown prince to break off the engagement. Under the circumstances, the general's wife just gave her a perfunctory greeting and paid her no more mind. The handkerchief in her hand was squeezed out of shape. Ever since she was rescued from the fire, she had never been treated so coldly. Before, she was just one of the less conspicuous young ladies in the capital, obscure for many years. Then she was completely transformed, stunning everyone, and had since been a prominent figure in the capital. It was rare for her to receive such a cold reception. I met the crown prince by the side of the courtyard pond. There was a hint of guilt in his eyes, and then he said, "Yanru, I hope you will find another good match. Don't hold on to this obsession any longer. Don't let me delay your happiness for the rest of your life." He thought I was still hung up on him. I shook my head and chuckled, finding it rather ironic. In my past life, I was indeed obsessed for a long time and fell gravely ill. But he paid no heed, never once asking about me, only immersing himself in Meng Yuanxi's tender embrace. And now, when there wasn't the slightest place for him in my eyes or my heart, he was speaking such words of concern, ignored him and turned to leave, only to see Meng Yuanxi watching us from a distance, an aura of coldness all around her. After the full moon banquet ended, the crown prince was sent to the coastal areas to investigate the case of salt smuggling. But just over a month after the crown prince left, news spread that the crown princess was gravely ill. In her previous life, Meng Yuanxi had indeed been gravely ill for a while. But that was still 2 years from now. At that time, It was because the crown prince's feelings for her had faded and he wanted to take a concubine that she took a type of medicine to deliberately feign illness. The crown prince, seeing her terminally ill, recalled their past of being stunned at first sight and falling in love at second sight. She also took advantage of the time the crown prince spent with her to recreate the beautiful memories of their past and made that moving promise of, to the highest heavens and the deepest underworld together in life and in death, until the crown prince's love for her was as deep as before, at which point she gradually recovered. But now she seemed to have felt a threat, so she moved all these actions forward. When the crown prince heard she was gravely ill, he could no longer care about the major salt smuggling case, entrusted those matters to his subordinates, and hurriedly returned to the capital. But the imperial physicians of the Imperial Medical Academy were helpless. In the end, it was a wandering miracle working doctor who entered the residence to treat her. That miracle working doctor said she could be cured if a rare item was used as a medicinal catalyst. This item was called the snow mistletoe lotus, even rarer than the ice mountain snow lotus. Only this item could save her life, but even the national treasury did not have this rare treasure. Afterwards, that miracle-working doctor added that if a drop of heart's blood from someone who had consumed this item were used as medicine, it could also have the same effect. When this news came out, all eyes in the capital were on the Jiang family. I took this medicine when I was sick as a child. Obviously, Meng Yuanxi was coming for me. The so-called wandering miracle doctor was probably someone in cahoots with her. My older brother said if anyone from the Eastern Palace dared to show up at our door, he would break their legs. But what was bound to happen happened. The crown prince himself paid a visit. The club in my brother's hand nearly dropped. It was a good thing. Father stopped him in time. The crown prince looked haggard, his eyes slightly red. He bowed low to me, his voice a bit hoarse. Sister Yan Ru, Yuanxi is terminally ill and running out of time. I am begging you, please save her. She is terminally ill, so what does that have to do with me? I retorted, raising an eyebrow. He was clearly at a loss for words, frozen on the spot. After a long moment, he finally said, I know you are upset about the broken engagement, but the fault is all mine. Don't take your anger out on her now. It is just a drop of your heart's blood to save her life. What is so difficult about that for you? You make it sound so easy, Your Highness. It is true, you don't feel the pain when it is not your own flesh being cut. My voice was tinged with mockery. His eyes were filled with utter shock. When did you become so cold-blooded? Watching him now, kept in the dark like a fool, I found it utterly laughable. Seeing him lose his composure like this actually made me curious about Meng Yuanxi's tricks. He patted my sleeves. All right, I'll go with you and check things out. My older brother looked extremely nervous, but he couldn't dissuade me, so he picked some guards skilled in martial arts to accompany me. Actually, there was no need for that. Upon entering the Eastern Palace, I saw Meng Yuanxi leaning on the couch looking like she was on her last breath, and the room was filled with the smell of medicine. I have to say, the medicine that wandering miracle doctor gave her was truly quite miraculous. This appearance of being critically ill and dying was realistic enough to fool anyone. If I hadn't known the truth beforehand, I am afraid I too would have thought she didn't have long to live. I had everyone withdraw, leaving only Meng Yuanxi and me in the room. She was coughing weakly. It is just the two of us now. You can drop the act, can't you? I sat down leisurely, stroking the red polish on my nails. Her gaze turned slightly cold as she stared fixedly at me, her eyes filled with probing and scrutiny. What do you mean? Faking an illness and setting up this scheme. Wasn't I your target all along? Heart's blood as medicine. How ridiculous. I raised my eyes, giving her a sidelong glance. With her entire pretense suddenly shattered, a hint of panic and helplessness appeared in her eyes, but a moment later, she calmed herself again and laughed arrogantly. Didn't you come for the crown prince too? Your beloved personally asked you to get your heart's blood to make medicine for another woman. This feeling must be excruciating, right? I slowly got up and walked to her bed, reached out and pinched her jaw, applied a little force, looked down at her and chuckled. You really think highly of him. A flash of shock and fear crossed her eyes. "Since you want me to bear the reputation of saving people for the greater good and having a benevolent heart, then I'll grant your wish. Since I've come to the East Palace today, I assume the Crown Princess will recover from her illness soon, right? If she doesn't recover, then it will be time to show everyone the Crown Princess's tricks," I said slowly. She understood the threat in my words, and then a flicker of unwillingness appeared in her eyes. She had schemed so hard, yet she was like a clown. I slowly released my hand and turned to leave the room. The Crown Prince was waiting anxiously in the courtyard. Seeing him like this, I casually said, "The Crown Princess will recover from her illness soon." He didn't understand why, and I returned home safely. My brother didn't understand why I got away unscathed, and still became the Crown Princess's savior. The Crown Princess's condition improved, and she gradually recovered from her illness. Gifts from the palace were sent to the Zhang Manor continuously, but I didn't pay them any mind. I can only say that Meng Yuanqi really shot herself in the foot this time, and had to grit her teeth and admit that I saved her. On both occasions, I gained the upper hand, and after she recovered from her illness, she seemed to have lost her composure. Due to her previous actions, as well as the Crown Prince rushing back to the capital this time, abandoning an important case, His Majesty became increasingly displeased with her and gradually showed disappointment towards the Crown Prince. She was eager to regain her status and frequently put herself forward. She predicted unrest in the southwestern barbarian tribes. And several months later, a rebellion broke out in the southwest. His Majesty planned to go to the hunting grounds in the autumn. She asserted that this trip would be inauspicious and strongly advised against it. And during the trip to the hunting grounds, there was a landslide with mud and rocks rolling down. The following year, during the rainy season, she predicted that the dikes in Jiangnan would break. Unexpectedly, every single prediction came true, and for a time, people all over the land marveled at her, and people from various manors flocked to see the Crown Princess, asking her to divine the future and predict good or bad fortune. I leisurely drank tea in a tea house, listening to the storyteller downstairs bang his wooden clapper, recounting the legendary story of the current Crown Princess. Those who heard it were all shocked. Everyone sighed that she was a goddess descended to earth, which was why she could foresee worldly affairs, and their faces were filled with reverence. I put down a silver ingot and quietly left amidst the cheers. Meng Yuanqi in this life. It was you who rushed things in the end. Just as the Eastern Palace was bustling with guests, the greatest diviner in the land, Xu Fu personally came out of seclusion to have an audience with the Son of Heaven, claiming that the stars showed an anomaly, that an enchantress had descended upon the world to bring chaos to the land, angering the will of heaven and bringing down celestial punishment, and that if this were to continue, the nation's fortune would become unstable, and the dynasty would change. Once these words were spoken, all accusations were pointed directly at the Eastern Palace. The rumors on the streets grew even more intense. Those storytellers started their tales with the fire at Guyuan Temple, recounting the great change in Meng Yuanqi's temperament before and after being rescued, as if she were a completely different person. They even mentioned the political essay she wrote that day, which covered all worldly affairs and showed insight into the entire world, something absolutely impossible for a sheltered young lady to have written. And yet, before this, she had been unremarkable among the noble ladies of the capital, with no reputation for talent, only to suddenly possess world. Shocking abilities overnight, it was truly and utterly abnormal. After that, there were even more frequent strange behaviors, dressing as a man to participate in the imperial examinations, bewitching the crown prince into keeping his harem empty for her, and even being able to predict the future and determine the good or ill fortune of worldly matters. And the crown prince, ever since meeting Meng Yuanqi, was no longer as virtuous as before. Now he is so besotted with her beauty that his judgment is clouded, neglecting his political duties and disregarding the rules of his ancestors and the laws of the land. All these various strange phenomena were signs of a demoness causing trouble. Even the children's rhymes on the street were singing. Enchantress appears, disaster is born, the country is in chaos. Recalling the words of the physiognomist, the common people in the market all said that it was not that Meng Yuanxi could foresee disasters, but that she was originally a demon girl who seduced the crown prince, brought down heavenly punishment, and caused disasters. I merely fanned the flames a little, and in just over a month she has transformed from a goddess in the eyes of the people to a demon girl who brings disaster. Taking advantage of the situation, the Yang family submitted a petition requesting the execution of the sorceress and the restoration of peace to the land. Many people responded, submitting a petition signed by thousands of citizens. The emperor decreed that Meng Yuanxi be imprisoned immediately. The incident happened suddenly, and she was still lost in old dreams. She couldn't understand why she, who was once adored by everyone as a goddess, had overnight become a demon girl and a prisoner, whom everyone wanted to beat. My brother and I stood at the high place of the tea house. My brother couldn't help but sigh. She was once honored and extremely glorious, but today she is surrounded by enemies, and everyone wants to beat her. I raised my eyes and smiled. Isn't this the inevitable outcome? She never cared about the way of survival for noble families. Today's bitter fruit was long foreseen. The crown prince defied the imperial will for her. Although all the women in the capital envied such deep affection and favor, she ultimately became the target of public criticism. The emperor disliked her, all the court officials condemned her, and the Yang clan harbored resentment. Meng Yuanxi has essentially pushed herself to the forefront, and now it is just a matter of kicking her while she is down. As for whether she is a goddess or a demon girl, who really cares? Big Brother nodded, and then let out a long sigh. In this lifetime, Meng Yuanxi lost faster than I imagined. Many things were completely different from what she expected, and my way of seizing the initiative and not playing by the book threw her off her game. This time, it was all thanks to you, Big Brother, for being able to persuade Shufu out of retirement. Otherwise, none of this would have been so easy. Hearing this, Big Brother lowered his eyes and said, "Although I went to invite him coming out of retirement wasn't to my credit." "What do you mean by that?" Big Brother sighed, then stood with his hands behind his back, gazing into the distance and said gravely, "Shufu came out of retirement because there was truly an anomaly in the star charts, and the situation in the imperial court is about to undergo a great change. The course of many events in this lifetime was already vastly different from my previous one. Calculating the time, perhaps the moment for certain changes had arrived. The change in the situation had to be with the Eastern Palace. In my previous life, the crown prince was instated and deposed twice. Now, what would become of him? Meng Yuanxi was thrown in jail, but the crown prince was unwilling to abandon her, kneeling for a long time outside Suyu Hall without getting up, pleading for her. But his stubbornness, in the emperor's eyes, was seen as being bewitched by a woman's beauty, having lost his senses and being unfit for great responsibility. This time, the emperor let him kneel, his heart not softening in the slightest. But the crown prince went as far as to submit a joint memorial with his supporters, angering the emperor so much that he threw the scroll right at his head. Everyone thought it was just a momentary fit of rage from the emperor, but that very night, the imperial edict was issued. No one expected the edict deposing the crown prince to come so suddenly. The imperial decree stated, disobedience to his lord and father, forming cliques for personal gain, indulging in debauchery, and being unfit for great responsibility. The crown prince had relied on the emperor's affection for the late empress to securely hold his position for many years. Later, his repeated defiance made the emperor increasingly disappointed, and by uniting a group of supporters to plead for Meng Yuanxi, nominally a petition, but in reality, a threat, he was forming a clique for personal gain, a major taboo for the emperor. As for Meng Yuanxi, since the crown prince is no longer the crown prince, she is no longer the crown princess. His Majesty's decree was execution by strangulation, but she couldn't care about what would happen with the crown prince being deposed. Instead, she was crying and shouting in her cell, demanding to see me in her past life. She had made the same request before being given the poisoned wine. Perhaps I should go see her one last time. Her hands gripped the bars, all composure lost. Her face twisted with fury as she said harshly, "That day you said I wasn't the only one who knew of future events. Was it you who plotted against me from behind the scenes?" I said softly. "Haven't you ever considered that you brought this upon yourself? The crown prince has been deposed, and there is no one left who can save you." The moment she heard the news, she collapsed to the ground, her eyes filled with desolation. How could this be? I transmigrated into a book. I know the ending for every single person in the book. Everything in the world was under my control. I wasn't content with being a nobody, with living a mediocre life. So I stole your fortune just to rewrite the ending with my own hands. Clearly everything at the beginning went exactly as I had predicted. But how did it all change later on? She seemed to find it very hard to accept this outcome. She had always been conceited, always feeling like she saw through everything and was a cut above the rest. But now she has been reduced to a prisoner, her life hanging by a thread. She forgot that from the moment she refused to accept the fate in the book and stole someone else's fortune, everything had already become subject to change. From the very beginning, you looked down on the people and things here, looking down from your high horse, always revealing your contempt. But you forgot. You were never fighting against just one person. This place is full of capable people, and it also has its own rules and laws, relying on those stolen things. You paraded around town, blindly arrogant. You were bound to fail eventually. As soon as I finished speaking, she laughed manically, her gaze filled with unwillingness and obsession, and after a long while, she began to speak to herself. "Did you know? This is the world of a book. Originally, you were supposed to marry Yi Jinan according to the childhood betrothal. The two of you would be a loving couple. 5 years later, he would ascend the throne as emperor, and you would become his empress. You are the actual female lead of the book, while I exhausted all my efforts to use Yi Jinan as a tool to climb up. But in the end, I still couldn't fight against the fate written in the book. These words, in her past life, before she died, she told me, and now it is just a repetition. Clearly it was her ambition at work. No one forced her to fight or snatch, but now she blames everything on others. In my past life, I also became empress, but not Yi Jinan's empress. Due to Meng Yuanxi's constant pressure, by chance, I married someone else. And that person eventually became emperor, and we went through decades of storms, becoming the best allies. And Yi Jinan's position as crown prince was established and abolished twice, and he finally rebelled, dying under a hail of arrows, while Meng Yuanxi was ended by a cup of poisoned wine. He did indeed change the fate of everyone in the book single-handedly. 15 years after her death, I died of illness in Fengqiao Palace. And because the obsession in my heart did not dissipate, I was reborn at the age of 15, which is the year Meng Yuanxi just transmigrated into the book. But there is no need to say these things to her anymore. For her, there is only this one life after transmigrating into the book, while for me, it is 2 lives. In the previous life, she stole people's luck, put herself into the game, changed the course of the book, and everyone's ending was different from the book. I originally didn't want to fight her, but she kept pushing, and my existence would only make her uneasy. With nowhere to retreat, I could only fight back. In the end, although I defeated her, it was not an easy victory. In this life, I have returned reborn, carrying the memories of the previous life, and she transmigrated into the book, still determined to change the ending of the book. But unexpectedly, the direction of everything in this life is neither the same as in the book, nor the same as in the previous life. The moment I turned to leave, a person at the corner unexpectedly came into view. Seeing him appear here, I understood that although his position as crown prince was abolished, the power behind him had not dissipated overnight. Looking at Yi Jinan's slightly red-rimmed eyes and his cold gaze, I figured he must have been standing here for a long time and had probably heard everything, both what he should and shouldn't have, at this moment. He still had genuine feelings for her, but she said he was just a tool for her to climb up. This sentence stripped away all of her pretense. In other words, whoever sits on the throne of the crown prince is Meng Yuanxi's target. He came here tonight, perhaps still not having given up hope, perhaps still intending to save her. But unfortunately, he personally stumbled upon this unsightly side of things. The person he treated with all his heart saw him as a tool, and what he thought was deep mutual affection was nothing but her elaborate scheme. From beginning to end, he was like a deceived fool. Meng Yuanxi's so-called genuine feelings were all a pretense, without a shred of affection. And now that the truth was revealed, for him, it wasn't just a simple matter of deception and betrayal. It also completely shattered his years of pride. The deep affection and protection he showed her in front of the world had all become a joke. I took my leave. What remained was a matter between the two of them. The next day, I heard that Meng Yuanxi was dead, strangled in prison. When the eunuch who carried out the execution arrived, Yi Jinan was there, and in the end, he did it himself. I was shocked for a long time. How could he be so ruthless and decisive? Afterwards, I understood that he was using Meng Yuanxi's life to appease the emperor, show loyalty, and express his intention to turn back, hoping to gain some sympathy from the emperor. I wonder if the crown prince will have a chance to be reinstated in this life. The capital was eerily quiet, almost unreal. Although Yi Jinan had been deposed, the emperor imposed no further punishment on him, and no one could fathom if the emperor had other intentions. Suddenly one day, Yi Jinan knocked on the gate of the Jiang mansion. He said he wanted to see me. When I saw him in the main hall, I felt he was very different from before. His whole demeanor was incredibly subdued, even carrying a hint of darkness. He asked me if I had ever truly loved him. I replied that I once did. It is just that this once is so long ago, spanning lifetimes, that I can no longer recall that feeling. He held my shoulders, his voice trembling with emotion, and said to me, "Yanru, I regret it. If you are willing to give me another chance, in the future, I will repay you 100-fold for what I owe you." In the past life, he came through the rain, knocking on the Jiang mansion's gate at night, and said the same words to me, but my answer is the same as it was back then. It was you who resolutely said you had no regrets that day, so you should understand that a move once made cannot be taken back, just as spilled water cannot be gathered. I am by nature free and unrestrained, yet after our engagement, I was willing to be shackled by rules, but you turned around and fell in love with that unrestrained and vibrant, or a man who never once firmly chose me. How are you worthy of asking me to turn back? Now, I no longer wish to mention what I learned for him, what I did for him, or what I gave up for him back when my heart first stirred with love. In my past life, I was obsessed. I forced things, yet all I got was his coldness and resolute rejection. I returned and changed many things, but the one thing I was unwilling to change was the ending between me and the crown prince. This marriage, even if he didn't call it off, I was going to call it off myself. He looked at my resolute stance. The rims of his eyes were red, and his eyes were bloodshot. Gone was the noble air he once had as the crown prince, and gone was the calm self-possession he had when he coldly broke off the engagement. At this moment, a self-deprecating, bitter smile hung on the corner of his lips, and then he said, "One wrong step, and every step after is wrong." He slowly stepped back, turned his head, and left. A few days later, the rebel army entered the city. The imperial city was besieged. Yi Jian rebelled, and he went down the same path as in his previous life. In the capital, everyone was in a state of panic. Rebel soldiers were appearing everywhere, and every household shut their doors tight, fearing that disaster would befall them. Just when everyone thought the dynasty would change hands, news came from the palace. The third prince, Yi Jinyu, had led his troops to quell the rebellion and was commended for protecting the emperor, while the deposed crown prince Yi Jinan had died under a hail of arrows. Quelling the rebellion with such lightning speed and no warning gave everyone in the court a new understanding of this low-key third prince. But he acted so quickly and with such ease, it was more like he'd seen it coming all along, like trapping a turtle in a jar. A bold idea flashed through my mind, but I didn't dare to think any further. Not until I saw him with my own eyes. He was riding a tall horse, dressed in an ink-black, cloud-patterned brocade robe. There was a subtle yet unapproachable feeling in his eyes, and his slightly arched sword, like brows, carried a natural air of slaughter and decisiveness. This kind of piercing aura would not easily appear on a low-key reserved prince, but would on an emperor who has long held a position of supreme authority. Looking at this familiar gaze, I was finally certain that he had really returned. Me mind was a whirlwind of thoughts as I saw him swing himself off his horse, reining in some of his cold aura, and walking slowly towards me, his eyes deep as the sea and impossible to fathom, as he chuckled lightly. Being keeping well? Reuniting with an old friend, it already felt like a lifetime had passed. The moment our gazes met, spanning the years of a past life, and this one, I subconsciously replied, "All is well." His eyes held a smile, his tone carrying a hard, to decipher complexity. "That is good, then. When we meet again, there are only these few brief words between us, and we don't even know what else to say. In our past life, we were allies who went through thick and thin together, and I was by his side as he came to rule the world. In this life, however, we are like strangers, only exchanging a few brief words." After experiencing the coup to depose the crown prince, the old emperor's heart was heavy with melancholy, so his illness worsened, and in the end, he was beyond cure, passing away half a year later. The third prince, Yi Jinyu, ascended the throne as emperor and changed the reign title to Qingyan. Clear rivers and calm seas, a prosperous and peaceful era. That was his grand ambition. That day, the emperor went out in disguise and came to the Jiang residence. I was sitting by the railing feeding the fish in the pond when I saw him standing beside the rockery, dressed in a green robe. I put down the fish food, bowed, and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." He walked through the flowers and brushed past the willows, approaching slowly, and raised a hand to signal me to rise. Ye Jinyu didn't speak, so I also remained silent, just lowering my head to continue feeding the fish. As the setting sun cast a gentle glow, he just sat there quietly beside me for the whole afternoon. Although it was quiet and wordless, it felt very natural, as if we were old friends of many years who could enjoy each other's company for a long time without needing to speak. It wasn't until dusk began to fall that he had to return to the palace. At this moment, he finally spoke in a gentle voice. "My harem still needs a clever empress to manage the 6 palaces and stabilize the front court for me. Are you willing?" When he asked this, his gaze was fixed on me, his eyes full of hope, wishing for an answer. I shook my head and said in a solemn voice, "I am not willing." The light in his eyes instantly dimmed. A faint, bitter smile played on his lips. Yet his eyes revealed a hint of relief, as if this outcome was also within his expectations. I said softly, "Your Majesty needs a smart empress, but there is no shortage of smart women among the noble families. And I am not a good choice. The Jiang family has produced 3 grand secretaries and prospered for 100 years. Instead of letting the Jiang family become the empress's maternal kin, which would lead to fear and suspicion in the future, it is better to let the Jiang clan continue as trusted, loyal subjects. Only in this way can the emperor be at ease and the tale of a good ruler and his subjects continue." The wry smile on his lips didn't fade. He just said faintly, "You always have your reasons. If you don't want to enter the palace, what are your plans for the future?" Scrolls of images unfolded in my mind, filled with infinite yearning, and I said with a smile, "I want to see the rustling, falling snow of the northern deserts, feel the fierce winds beyond Yuhua Pass, and I also want to boat on West Lake in Guzu and gallop on a fine horse across the vast grasslands." Hearing this, his slightly furrowed brow finally smoothed out, and he smiled in relief. "Then, as you wish." On the day I left the capital, someone came from the palace and hastily stopped my carriage. That person, with a long sword at their waist, bowed respectfully. "Miss Jiang," His Majesty said, "he cannot visit those magnificent lands himself, so he is having you go see them for him." I gazed at the imperial city from afar, feeling wistful for a long time, then I agreed. "All right." He then handed over a gold medallion and said respectfully, "Majesty said this gold medallion is a gift to you. Seeing this medallion is like the Son of Heaven arriving in person." If you encounter any injustice, you may decide on the matter yourself. Thank His Majesty for me." I slowly took it and stroked the pattern on the gold plaque, feeling a slight tightness in my heart. Just as I was about to lower the curtain, he spoke again. "His Majesty also said." He paused for a moment and said in a deep voice, "His Majesty also said that if the young lady gets tired of playing outside one day and gets tired of seeing it, the gate of the imperial city will always be open to her." No need. I quietly lowered the curtain, blocking our sight, and the carriage slowly moved forward. My heart yearns for the world outside, never for the small space within the vermilion walls. Yajinyu extra the moment our eyes met when I saw her at the end of the long street that day. We both knew of each other's return. The day she left the capital, I stood on the city wall but dared not go down to see her off in person. Even the words I wanted to say could only be relayed through others, because I was afraid of seeing her indifferent gaze, afraid of hearing her firm refusal, and even more afraid that I wouldn't be able to let her go if I saw it with my own eyes. When I asked her that day if she was willing to enter the palace, I actually knew the answer long ago, but I still asked her stubbornly, and got the expected answer. She was unwilling. This imperial city was the place that bound her in her past life. She desperately wanted to escape, but wasted half her life within its walls, caught between imperial power and the Zhang family. She was trapped in the inner palace, overworked to the point of illness, and died in despair. Before she died, she held my hand tightly, telling me her only wish was for the Zhang family to be safe and sound. She asked to be deposed as empress, not to enter the imperial mausoleum after death. Only wishing to be buried at South Mountain, she wanted to see the spring flowers grow freely there, and the winter snow fall freely. I fulfilled her wish. The Jiang family is as prosperous as ever, with capable officials emerging one after another. Afterward, the position of empress remained vacant for a lifetime, and there was no other woman. If rebirth is due to one's unwillingness and obsession before death, then she must have been unwilling to be swept up by fate and trapped in the deep palace, shackled her entire life, and ultimately unable to live freely. And her obsession was to be free, to roam freely in the vast world. And as for my unwillingness and obsession, in the end, I could never have both. In my past life, I went against her will and did not depose her as empress. In this life, I will grant her wish and let her be free. She should be a phoenix soaring freely, not trapped within these vermilion walls. From now on, the majestic imperial city is only my shackle, no longer her cage.